The first time Rhea Dalton saw Caleb Voss, she wasn't looking. She was bent over her workbench, squinting at a seam that refused to lie flat, her fingers cramping from 3 straight hours of hemming Mrs. Patterson's ridiculous ball gown. The fabric was expensive, imported silk that cost more than Rhea made in a month, and unforgiving. One wrong stitch and the whole thing would pucker. Outside her shop window, Coldwater Ridge was putting on a show. "He's coming down Main Street." "Someone fetch Martha. She'll want to fix her hair." "Is that really him? I thought he'd be taller." Rhea didn't look up. She'd lived in this town long enough to know when to make herself invisible, and whenever the local women got excited about a man, that was her cue to disappear into her work. She was good at disappearing. 28 years of practice had made her exceptional at it. The bell above her door chimed. "Rhea, you have to see this." That was Maggie Chen, the baker's daughter, bursting in with flowers still dusting her sleeves. Maggie was one of the few people in Coldwater Ridge who spoke to Rhea like she was human. "See what?" Rhea didn't look up from her stitching. "Caleb Voss is back. He hasn't been down from his mountain in 2 years, and he just rode into town with 3 pack horses loaded with furs. Every widow between here and the church is practically throwing themselves at his feet. Good for them." Rhea snipped a thread with more force than necessary. "Aren't you even curious?" "About what?" "Another man I'll never meet. I've got Mrs. Patterson's dress due tomorrow, Maggie. I don't have time for He's different, Rhea. I don't know. Quiet. Doesn't smile. Looks like he could snap a man in half but hasn't said more than 10 words to anyone. The widows are going crazy trying to get his attention." Rhea finally looked up, meeting Maggie's excited eyes with her own tired ones. "Then I'm sure one of them will succeed. They always do." Maggie's face softened. "You shouldn't talk like that." "Like what? Honestly?" Rhea turned back to her work. "Go watch the show, Maggie. Enjoy it. Just close the door on your way out. The draft ruins my tension." After Maggie left, Rhea worked in silence for another hour. She was good at silence. Good at the small, precise work that kept her fed and housed in a town that would rather pretend she didn't exist. Her shop was tiny, just the front room with its display window and workbench, and the back room where she slept on a narrow cot surrounded by bolts of fabric and boxes of thread. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The sun was setting when she finally set down Mrs. Patterson's dress, her eyes burning from the close work. She stood, stretching her back until it popped, and walked to the window to pull the shade. That's when she saw him. Caleb Voss was standing directly across the street, partially hidden in the shadow of the general store's awning. He wasn't looking at the widow parade that had apparently followed him through town. He wasn't looking at the storefronts or the mountains or anything else. He was looking at her shop. Rhea's hand froze on the shade pull. He was tall, taller than most men in Coldwater Ridge, with shoulders that belonged to someone who worked with his hands. Dark hair, longer than was fashionable, brushed his collar. His clothes were practical, worn leather, heavy canvas, boots that had seen real miles. Nothing about him suggested he cared what anyone thought. And he was staring directly at her window. Rhea yanked the shade down so fast she nearly pulled the whole mechanism off the wall. Her heart was hammering. Stupid. He wasn't looking at you. He was probably just waiting for someone, or looking at the building, or... The bell above her door chimed. Rhea spun around, her pulse jumping into her throat. Caleb Voss stood in her doorway, one hand still on the door, his expression unreadable. Up close, he was even more substantial, not just tall but solid, built like someone who'd spent his life doing hard things. His eyes were gray, the color of winter clouds, and they swept across her shop with an attention that felt almost physical. Then they landed on her. Rhea's mouth went dry. "You're the seamstress." His voice was low, rougher than she'd expected, like he didn't use it much. Yes, Rhea Dalton." She hated how small her voice sounded. "Can I help you with something?" He stepped inside, letting the door close behind him. The shop suddenly felt much smaller. "I need work done." "What kind of work?" He pulled a bundle from inside his coat and set it on her workbench. When he unwrapped it, Rhea saw a heavy leather jacket, the kind mountain men wore in deep winter. The leather was good quality but old, and one shoulder seam had split completely. "Can you fix this?" Rhea picked up the jacket, examining the damage. The leather was thick, the kind that required special needles and waxed thread. It was also filthy, stained with what looked like pine sap, animal blood, and years of hard use. "I can fix it," she said slowly, "but I'll need to clean it first, and this kind of repair, it'll take time. A week, maybe more." "How much?" She named a price that was fair, maybe even slightly low, considering the work involved. She'd learned the hard way that charging too much gave people an excuse to complain. He reached into his pocket without hesitation and pulled out more than she'd asked for. "Half now. Half when it's done. And I'll pay extra if you can have it finished in 3 days." Rhea stared at the coins in his hand. That much money would cover her rent for the month and then some. But 3 days for this kind of work, with everything else she had to finish? "I can do it in 5, she heard herself say. "Best I can promise." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. 5 days. I'll be back." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You live here? Above the shop?" The question caught her off guard. "In the back." "Why?" "The lock on your front door is broken. Anyone could push it open." Rhea looked at the door. She'd noticed the lock was sticky, but broken. I'll get it fixed. I'll fix it tomorrow." He said it like it was already decided. Before noon. Before she could respond, he was gone. Rhea stood in her empty shop, holding his jacket and trying to figure out what had just happened. Outside, she could hear the widows still chattering, their voices sharp with curiosity and competition. "Did you see where he went?" "He was in the seamstress shop." "Why would he need a seamstress?" "Maybe he's getting something made for someone special." The speculation continued, but Rhea barely heard it. She was too busy staring at the coins he'd left on her workbench, more money than she usually saw in 2 weeks. She picked up the jacket again, running her fingers over the damaged seam. The leather still held warmth from his body. Tomorrow. He'd said he'd be back tomorrow. Rhea shook her head, trying to clear it. "Don't be stupid. He needs his jacket fixed. That's all this is. Don't make it into something it's not." But when she finally locked up for the night, after testing the broken lock 3 times, she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her shop window, about the way he'd spoken to her like she was someone worth talking to, not someone to hurry past or ignore. She fell asleep that night with his jacket on the chair beside her cot, still smelling of pine smoke and mountain air. The next morning, Rhea woke to pounding. She jerked upright, her heart racing, before she realized someone was knocking on her front door. The light coming through her one small window was thin and gray, barely past dawn. She pulled on her dress, not bothering with her hair, and stumbled to the front room. Caleb Voss stood on her doorstep with a toolbox. "You said before noon," he said by way of greeting. "This is before noon." Rhea stared at him, still half asleep. "It's barely sunrise. You want it fixed or not?" She stepped back, letting him in. He went straight to the door, kneeling down to examine the lock with the kind of focus most men reserved for things they actually cared about. Rhea retreated to her workbench, trying to wake up properly. She hadn't expected him to actually show up, and she definitely hadn't expected him at dawn. She watched him work, his hands moving with surprising precision for someone so large. He didn't talk, didn't ask for conversation, just fixed the lock with the quiet efficiency of someone who solved problems for a living. "Coffee?" The word came out before she'd thought about it. She didn't have much, didn't usually offer anything to anyone, but it felt wrong to just stand there watching him work for free. He glanced up. "You have any?" "A little." "Then yes." She heated water on her small stove, measuring out the precious coffee grounds she usually saved for Sunday mornings. When she brought him a cup, he took it without comment, but she caught something in his expression that might have been appreciation. They sat in silence, him on the floor by her door, her perched on her workbench, drinking terrible coffee while the town slowly woke up outside. "Why are you doing this?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He looked at her over the rim of his cup. "Fixing your lock? That, the jacket. Coming here instead of anywhere else." "You're a seamstress. I need sewing done." Seems straightforward. "There are other seamstresses." "Are there?" He set down his cup and went back to the lock. "Haven't seen any." Rhea opened her mouth, then closed it. There was Mrs. Hendricks, who did alterations for the wealthy families up on Ridge Street, and Sarah Bloom, who specialized in wedding dresses and formal wear. Both of them were thinner, prettier, and more socially acceptable than Rhea would ever be. But she didn't say any of that. Caleb worked for another 20 minutes, then tested the lock several times. It moved smoothly now, clicking into place with a solid sound that her old lock had never made. "That should hold," he said, standing and brushing off his hands. "Keep it oiled once a month." "I don't know how to thank you." Don't need thanks. Needed doing." He picked up his toolbox. "I'll be back in 5 days for the jacket." He was halfway out the door when Rhea found her voice again. "Mr. Voss?" He turned back. "Why did you really come to my shop?" For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he said, "Saw you working yesterday, through your window. You were bent over that dress like nothing else in the world mattered, like you were trying to make something perfect." He paused. People who care that much about their work are usually worth knowing. Then he was gone, leaving Rhea standing in her shop with her heart doing something complicated and terrifying in her chest. The gossip started before lunch. "Did you see him go into her shop again?" "At dawn. What could they possibly—" "It's not proper, is what it is. Maybe he feels sorry for her." "Well, someone should tell him there are better options." Rhea heard it all. She always heard it all. The walls of Coldwater Ridge were thin, and people rarely bothered to lower their voices when talking about her. She'd learned to let it wash over her like rain. Unpleasant, but not worth stopping for. But today, the words stuck. She worked through the day with a focus that bordered on obsessive, cleaning Caleb's jacket with solutions that wouldn't damage the leather, then carefully reconstructing the torn seam with stitches so small they were almost invisible. The work was meditative, each pull of the needle driving away thoughts she didn't want to have. Don't be stupid. Don't make this into something it's not. But her hands were shaking slightly as she worked, and she had to restart the same section 3 times before getting it right. By the time she finished Mrs. Patterson's dress that evening, she was exhausted. She wrapped it carefully in paper and walked the 6 blocks to the Patterson house, a sprawling estate on Ridge Street that made her little shop look like a closet. The maid who answered the door looked at her like she'd tracked in something unpleasant. "Tradesman's entrance is around back." Rhea swallowed her pride. She'd had plenty of practice at that, and walked around to the back door. Mrs. Patterson came down eventually, inspecting the dress with the kind of scrutiny that suggested she was hoping to find a flaw. She didn't find one. "Well," Mrs. Patterson said, her tone suggesting this disappointed her, "I suppose it will do, though I'm not sure about this hem length. I can adjust it if you'd like. No extra charge." No, I suppose it's fine." She handed over payment, exact change, not a penny more. "I'll keep you in mind for future work." They both knew she wouldn't. Rhea walked home through streets that were dark, except for the warm glow of windows, each one a little picture of lives she'd never be part of. Families eating dinner, couples talking, children laughing. Her shop was dark and cold when she got back. She was just lighting her lamp when she noticed something on her doorstep, a paper-wrapped package tied with plain string. Rhea picked it up carefully, her heart picking up speed. Inside the paper was a small jar of lock oil and a note written in blocky, practical handwriting. "For the lock, don't forget." No signature. Didn't need one. Rhea stood in her doorway, holding a jar of oil and a note from a man she barely knew, and felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been sealed shut for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Hope. It was terrifying. Voss said. Over the next 3 days, Caleb Voss became the only thing anyone in Coldwater Ridge could talk about. He'd taken a room at the boarding house but spent most of his time working, repairing equipment, selling furs, preparing for his return to the mountain. He was polite but distant, answering questions with as few words as possible, and showing no interest in the social games that usually consumed the town. The widows were relentless. Martha Brennan, whose husband had died 2 years ago leaving her with 3 children and a profitable dry goods store, made sure to accidentally bump into Caleb at least twice a day. Catherine Walsh, younger and prettier, took to walking past wherever he was working, always with some transparent excuse about needing to speak to someone nearby. Even Grace Thornton, who'd been widowed less than 6 months and still wore black, suddenly developed an interest in fur trading that required her to ask Caleb extensive questions about his business. He was polite to all of them. He was also clearly uninterested. "I don't understand it," Rhea heard Martha complaining to a friend outside her shop window. "I'm established, respectable, and I certainly know how to run a household. What more could a man want?" "Maybe he doesn't want to be tied down," her friend suggested. "Mountain men are different. Maybe he's just here to trade and then he'll disappear again." "Then why does he keep going to the seamstress shop?" Rhea's hand stilled on the shirt she was mending. "I've seen him there 3 times now," Martha continued. "What could he possibly need with her?" "Maybe he feels charitable." "Well, charity is one thing, but people are starting to talk. It doesn't look right, him spending so much time with someone like her." "Someone should say something." "Someone should." They moved on, their voices fading, but Rhea stayed frozen at her workbench. 3 times. He'd been to her shop 3 times, and she'd been too focused on work to realize how many people had noticed. The first visit had been to fix her lock. The second had been to bring her more leather work, a pair of gloves that needed new lining. The third had been yesterday, when he'd stopped by to ask if she needed anything from the general store since he was going anyway. She'd said no. She always said no. She'd learned that accepting help just meant owing people, and owing people in Coldwater Ridge was dangerous. But now people were talking, and talking in this town was its own kind of danger. Rhea tried to push the worry away and focus on work. She had Caleb's jacket to finish, just one more day of work, and 3 other projects that needed attention. She couldn't afford to waste time worrying about gossip. But that night, when she locked up her shop, she noticed something wrong. Her display window, which she'd carefully arranged with samples of her work, had been vandalized. Not broken, nothing that obvious. But someone had smeared something across the glass, obscuring the view, and when she went outside to look, she found mud mixed with something worse. The message was clear. "You're not wanted here." Rhea stood in the street, staring at her ruined display, and felt something in her go very cold and very still. She'd lived in Coldwater Ridge for 15 years. She'd been quiet, respectful, and unobtrusive. She'd never caused problems, never competed with anyone, never asked for anything she hadn't earned. And still, they found ways to remind her she didn't belong. She was cleaning the window with shaking hands when a voice spoke from the darkness. "Who did this?" Rhea jumped, nearly dropping her bucket. Caleb stepped out of the shadows, his face hard. "I don't know," Rhea said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It could have been anyone." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have." She went back to scrubbing, putting all her anger into the motion. "This is Coldwater Ridge, Mr. Voss. This is what it's like here." "For you, you mean?" She looked at him sharply. "What?" "This is what it's like here for you." He stepped closer, examining the window. "Because you're not like them." "I'm exactly like them. I work hard, pay my rent, keep to myself. That's not what I mean." He was looking at her now, not the window. "You're not playing their games, not competing for their approval. That scares them." Rhea laughed, but it came out bitter. "I don't scare anyone, Mr. Voss. I'm just easy to ignore." "Is that what you think?" "That's what I know." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Someone who's easy to ignore doesn't get their window vandalized." The observation landed like a punch. Rhea stopped scrubbing. "They're not scared of me," she said softly. "They're scared of what I represent. The idea that someone like me could exist in their world without apologizing for it, that's what they can't stand." Caleb picked up her bucket and dumped the dirty water into the street. "You need better security. I need to be left alone." "Those aren't the same thing." He handed her the bucket. "Your jacket's done tomorrow?" The subject changed through her. "Yes, tomorrow afternoon." "Good. I'll pick it up then." He started to walk away, then paused. "Lock your doors tonight." "Front and back." "I always do." "Do it anyway." He disappeared into the darkness before she could respond. Rhea stood alone in the street, holding an empty bucket and trying to figure out what had just happened. The cold that had settled in her chest earlier was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Something that felt dangerously like defiance. The next day, Rhea finished Caleb's jacket. She'd taken extra care with every stitch, reinforcing the seam so thoroughly it would probably outlast the rest of the garment. The leather cleaned up better than she'd expected, and when she was done, it looked almost new. She folded it carefully and set it on her workbench, trying not to think about what it meant when he picked it up. He'd leave, back to his mountain, back to his solitude. And Coldwater Ridge would go back to being exactly what it had always been, a place where Rhea Dalton existed, but didn't matter. The thought shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. She was working on a new project, a christening gown for the mayor's granddaughter, when the bell chimed. Caleb filled her doorway, looking exactly the same as he had the first time. Solid, quiet, and somehow out of place in her small shop. "It's ready," Rhea said, gesturing to the jacket. He picked it up, examining her work with the same careful attention he'd given everything else. His fingers traced the repaired seam, testing its strength. "This is good work." He wasn't flattering her. It was just a fact. Better than it was new. "Thank you." He pulled out payment, again, more than she'd asked for the rush job. "You already paid for that." "This is for the quality." He set the coins on her workbench with the same finality he did everything. "I'll be in town another week. Need anything else done?" Rhea's heart jumped. "Another week? I thought mountain men usually leave faster." "I know." Something shifted in his expression. "Got business to finish." "What kind of business?" He looked at her for a long moment, and Rhea had the sudden, dizzying feeling that she was the business he was talking about. "Mr. Voss." "Caleb." "What?" "My name's Caleb. You should use it." He pulled on the jacket, settling it across his shoulders. It fit him perfectly. "I'd like to buy you dinner." The words hung in the air between them. Rhea's first instinct was to say no, to make an excuse, to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment that came from hoping for things she couldn't have. But looking at Caleb, at the quiet certainty in his gray eyes, the way he stood in her shop like he had every right to be there, like she had every right to exist, something in her broke. Not broke free. "The boarding house serves meals," she heard herself say, "but I'm not. People will talk." "Let them. You don't understand what this town is like." "I understand exactly what this town is like." He moved closer, and Rhea had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I understand they've spent years trying to make you small, trying to make you disappear. And I understand you're still here, still working, still surviving despite everything they've done." He paused. "That's not weakness, Rhea. That's strength most people don't have." Rhea's throat went tight. "You're a stranger here. You don't know me. I know you get up every morning and face a town that hates you for existing. I know you do work that would make most people give up, and you do it alone. I know you fix my jacket like it mattered, even though I'm nobody to you." His voice softened slightly. "That's enough to know you're worth having dinner with." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why me? There are women in this town who would—" "I don't want those women." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I want to have dinner with you." Rhea looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected: honesty. No games, no hidden agenda, just a man asking a question and meaning it. "Tomorrow night," she said. 6 o'clock. Something that might have been a smile touched his mouth. Tomorrow night. He left then, taking his repaired jacket and leaving Rhea standing in her shop, her hands shaking and her heart doing something that felt dangerously like hope. Outside, she could already hear the whispers starting. Did you see him leave her shop? Looking quite pleased with himself. What could they have been talking about for so long? Nothing good, I'm sure. Rhea listened to them, and for the first time in 15 years, she didn't care. Let them talk. Let them whisper and speculate and judge. Tomorrow night she was having dinner with Caleb Voss, and the whole town could burn for all she cared. She went back to work on the christening gown, and if her stitches were a little uneven because her hands wouldn't stop shaking, well, she'd fix them later. For now, she let herself feel something she hadn't allowed in years. Happy. That night Rhea did something she'd never done before. She went to her small mirror, the one she usually avoided, and really looked at herself. Round face, full cheeks, a body that had never been small and never would be, brown hair that wouldn't hold a curl, plain features that no one would call pretty. The mirror showed her exactly what Coldwater Ridge saw, someone who didn't fit their definition of valuable. But Caleb had looked at her like none of that mattered. Rhea touched her reflection, her fingers leaving marks on the glass. Tomorrow night. She had one day to prepare for something she'd never thought would happen. One day to decide if she was brave enough to let herself hope. Outside her window, Coldwater Ridge slept on, unaware that everything was about to change. The woman they'd spent 15 years trying to erase was about to step into the light. And nothing would ever be the same. The next morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Rhea woke before dawn, her stomach twisted in knots. She'd barely slept, her mind running through every possible disaster that could happen at dinner. Every way Caleb might realize he'd made a mistake. Every cruel comment the other diners would make, thinking she couldn't hear. She got up anyway, splashed cold water on her face, and tried to convince herself she could do this. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. She had work to finish. The christening gown still needed delicate lace attached to the collar, but her hands kept trembling, making the stitches uneven. She had to rip out the same seam twice before getting it right. Around noon, Maggie burst through the door, her eyes wide. "Is it true?" Rhea didn't look up from her work. "Is what true?" "That Caleb Voss asked you to dinner. Martha Brennan is telling everyone that you're—" She stopped herself. "Well, she's saying things." "I'm sure she is." Rhea's voice came out flat. She'd expected this. Hoped it wouldn't happen, but expected it. "So it's true? You're having dinner with him?" "Yes." Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled up a stool and sat down across from Rhea's workbench. "Do you know what you're doing?" "Having dinner." "Rhea." Maggie's voice went soft. "The widows are furious. I heard Martha and Catherine talking outside the bakery this morning. They're not going to just let this go." "Let what go?" "A man asked me to dinner, that's all." "That's not all, and you know it. Caleb Voss is the first eligible man to come through this town in months. He's successful, independent, and every widow from here to the ridge has been throwing themselves at him. And he ignored all of them to ask out the—" She caught herself again. "The fat seamstress nobody wants." Rhea finished the sentence for her, her needle moving with vicious precision. "You can say it, Maggie. I've heard worse." "I wasn't going to say that." "But everyone else is." Rhea finally looked up, meeting Maggie's worried eyes. "They've been saying it for 15 years. Why should tonight be any different?" "Because tonight you're stepping into their world. You're not just the seamstress they ignore anymore. You're competition." The word landed hard. Rhea set down her needle, her hands going still. "I'm not competing with anyone. That's not how they'll see it." Maggie leaned forward. "I'm not trying to scare you. I just want you to be careful. These women, they're not kind when they feel threatened. I've lived in this town for 15 years, Maggie. I know exactly how kind they are." After Maggie left, Rhea tried to go back to work, but her concentration was shot. She kept thinking about what Maggie had said. Competition. As if Rhea had ever been allowed to compete for anything. By 5 o'clock, her nerves were so raw she could barely function. She had one good dress, a dark blue cotton she'd made herself, plain but well fitted. She put it on with shaking hands, then stood in front of her mirror trying to fix her hair. It wouldn't cooperate. It never did. After 20 minutes of fighting with it, she gave up and pinned it back in a simple bun. "You look like what you are," she thought, staring at her reflection. Plain, ordinary, forgettable. But Caleb had asked her to dinner anyway. She grabbed her shawl and locked up the shop, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. The boarding house was 3 blocks away. It felt like 3 miles. The evening was cool, the sun just starting to set, painting Coldwater Ridge in shades of gold and amber. Under different circumstances, it might have been beautiful. Right now, it just felt exposing, like the whole town could see her walking to dinner and knew exactly what a mistake she was making. She was half a block from the boarding house when she heard voices. "Well, well, look who's all dressed up." Rhea's stomach dropped. She turned to find Martha Brennan standing with Catherine Walsh and 2 other women Rhea recognized but didn't know by name. They'd positioned themselves on the boardwalk, blocking her path. "Mrs. Brennan?" Rhea kept her voice neutral. "Ladies? Going somewhere special?" Martha's smile didn't reach her eyes. She was a handsome woman in her late 30s with the kind of confidence that came from money and social standing. "You look different." "I have plans." "Plans," Catherine laughed. the sound sharp. She was younger than Martha, maybe 25, with blonde hair and features that men called delicate. "We've heard about your plans. The whole town has." Rhea tried to step around them, but Martha moved to block her. "We wanted to have a word with you," Martha said, her voice dropping lower. Woman to woman. "I don't have time for this." "Make time." Martha's smile vanished. "You need to understand something, Rhea. Caleb Voss is a good man, a valuable man. He deserves someone appropriate." The word hit like a slap. Appropriate. "And you think that's you?" Rhea heard herself say. Martha's eyes went cold. "I think it's certainly not you. A man like that needs a proper wife. Someone who can manage a household, host gatherings, represent him in society, not some—" She gestured vaguely at Rhea. "Some woman who can barely manage herself." "I manage just fine." "Do you?" Catherine stepped closer, her pretty face twisted with something ugly. "You live in a room behind your shop. You have no family, no connections, no future beyond hemming dresses for women who pity you enough to throw work your way. What could you possibly offer a man like Caleb Voss?" The question burned because Rhea had asked herself the same thing 100 times since yesterday. "That's between me and him," she said quietly. "Is it?" Martha moved even closer, and Rhea caught the scent of her expensive perfume. "Because I think you're being selfish. You know this won't last. You know he'll realize his mistake. And when he does, you'll have wasted his time he could have spent with someone suitable. Someone like you. Yes, someone like me, or Catherine, or Grace, or any of the other women in this town who could actually be proper partners." Martha's voice went soft, almost gentle. "We're not trying to be cruel, Rhea. We're trying to help you avoid embarrassment. Just tell him you've reconsidered. Make an excuse. Let him find someone appropriate before this goes any further." Rhea looked at the 4 women surrounding her, their faces a mixture of anger and something worse, pity. They genuinely believed they were helping. They genuinely couldn't imagine why a man like Caleb would choose her. And the worst part was, neither could she. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely steady. "Rhea, excuse me." She pushed past them, her eyes burning, her whole body shaking. Behind her, she heard Catherine mutter something that included the word desperate, followed by laughter. Rhea kept walking, one foot in front of the other. "Don't cry. Don't let them see you cry." She made it to the boarding house steps before her vision blurred completely. "Rhea!" She looked up to find Caleb standing in the doorway, his expression shifting from pleased to concerned in an instant. "What happened?" He came down the steps toward her. "Did someone—" "I'm fine." She wiped at her eyes angrily. "I just need a moment." He looked past her, his gaze landing on the group of women still standing on the boardwalk. Something in his face went very hard. "Wait here." "Caleb, don't!" But he was already walking toward them, his stride purposeful and dangerous. Rhea watched, her heart in her throat, as he stopped in front of Martha Brennan. She couldn't hear what he said. His voice was too low, too controlled. But she saw Martha's face go pale, saw Catherine take a step back, saw all 4 women suddenly looking anywhere but at Caleb. He spoke for maybe 30 seconds, then turned and walked back to Rhea, leaving the women standing frozen on the boardwalk. "What did you say to them?" Rhea asked as he approached. "That if they had something to say about my choices, they could say it to me directly. And that if I caught any of them bothering you again, they'd regret it." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" Rhea stared at his arm, then at his face. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He waited patiently. "Dinner?" She took his arm, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it in the crook of his elbow. His arm was solid beneath her fingers, steady and warm even through the fabric of his jacket. The boarding house dining room was half full when they entered, and the conversation didn't stop so much as stumble. Rhea felt every eye in the room turn toward them, felt the weight of judgment and speculation pressing down on her shoulders. Caleb seemed completely unbothered. He led her to a table by the window, pulled out her chair, and sat down across from her like they did this every day. "You should know," Rhea said quietly, her hands twisted together in her lap. "This is going to make things worse." "For who?" "For me. When you leave. They're going to— I'm not leaving yet. But you will. Eventually. And when I do, we'll figure it out. He said it like it was simple, like the world wasn't watching them right now, taking notes on all the ways this didn't make sense. The boarding house owner's daughter came to take their order, her eyes darting between them with barely concealed curiosity. Caleb ordered for both of them without asking what Rhea wanted, but somehow he got it right. The chicken, not the beef, with extra vegetables. After the girl left, Rhea finally found her voice again. How did you know I'd want the chicken? You had flour on your hands yesterday. Baker's flour, not regular. Saw it when you were working. He leaned back slightly. Figured someone who bakes probably likes chicken over beef. That's a strange thing to notice. I notice things. His gray eyes held hers, especially things that matter. Rhea's throat went tight. I don't understand you. What don't you understand? Any of this, why you're here, why you asked me to dinner, why you're sitting across from me when you could have your pick of... She gestured vaguely at the room. Anyone else? I don't want anyone else. But why? He was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. Then he said, You want the truth? Yes. I spent the last 8 years on a mountain. Just me, the snow, and silence. Came down twice a year to trade and resupply. Every time I'd watch people in towns like this one, all playing the same games, pretending to be something they're not. Saying things they don't mean, chasing things that don't matter. He paused. Then I saw you through your window, working on that dress. You weren't performing for anyone. You were just doing the work, caring about it, being real. That's it? You saw me working and decided, I saw you being honest in a town full of liars. Yeah, that was enough. The food arrived before Rhea could respond. She stared down at her plate, trying to process what he'd just said. Being honest, as if that was something special, as if just existing as herself was worth noticing. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was good, better than what Rhea usually made for herself, but she could barely taste it. She was too aware of the whispers around them, the pointed looks, the way conversations kept stopping and starting as people tried to eavesdrop. Does it bother you? She finally asked. The staring? No. It bothers me. I know. He cut into his chicken with precise movements. That's why we're going to keep doing it. Rhea looked up sharply. What? Keep doing it. Having dinner, being seen together, until it stops bothering you. That's not how this works. They're not going to just accept this. Don't need them to accept it. Just need them to see that I'm not changing my mind. Caleb, she set down her fork. You don't understand what this town is like. What they're like. They've spent 15 years making sure I know my place. This dinner, what you're doing, it's not going to change that. It's just going to make them angry. Good. The word was so unexpected that Rhea actually laughed. It came out shaky and a little broken, but it was real. You want to make them angry? I want them to see that their opinions don't matter. He met her eyes. And I want you to see it too. Before Rhea could respond, a shadow fell across their table. She looked up to find Grace Thornton standing there, still in her widow's black, her face carefully composed. Mr. Voss, Grace said, her voice soft and cultured. I hope I'm not interrupting. You are. Caleb didn't look up from his meal. Grace's smile tightened slightly. I just wanted to invite you to dinner tomorrow night, at my home. I'm hosting several of the town's leading families, and I thought you might enjoy meeting... No. The word was flat, final. Grace blinked. I'm sorry? I said no, I have plans. Oh. Grace's eyes flicked to Rhea, something cold moving behind them. I see. Well, perhaps another time. There won't be another time, Mrs. Thornton. I'm not interested in your dinners or your leading families. He finally looked up, and his gaze was ice. Is there anything else? Grace's composure cracked, just for a second, but Rhea saw it, saw the flash of genuine anger before she smoothed it away. No, nothing else. Enjoy your meal. She walked away, her back rigid, and Rhea watched her join Martha and Catherine at a corner table. All three women were staring now, not even pretending to hide it. You just made an enemy, Rhea said quietly. I made 3 enemies a week ago when I walked past them to your shop. Caleb went back to eating. This just makes it official. You don't care? About what 3 bitter women think of me? No. He paused. Do you? Rhea thought about it, really thought about it. A week ago, the answer would have been yes. She'd spent 15 years caring what everyone thought, trying to be small enough, quiet enough, invisible enough that they'd leave her alone. But sitting here, in this dining room full of people who'd spent years making her feel worthless, with a man who looked at her like she mattered, something in her shifted. No, she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. I don't care. Something that might have been approval crossed Caleb's face. Good. They finished their meal in relative peace, though the whispers never stopped. When Caleb paid, leaving enough to cover both meals and a generous tip, the owner's daughter looked like she wanted to ask questions but didn't quite dare. Caleb walked Rhea back to her shop, the evening air cool against her flushed skin. She was intensely aware of his presence beside her, the way he matched his stride to hers without comment, the way he positioned himself between her and the street like it was the most natural thing in the world. When they reached her door, she turned to face him, suddenly unsure what to say. Thank you. For dinner. Thank you for coming. He paused. Despite everything. Despite everything, she echoed. Then before she could stop herself, what happens now? Now you go inside, lock your door, and get some sleep. His mouth quirked slightly. And tomorrow, we do it again. Again? Dinner. Tomorrow night, if you want. Rhea's heart did something complicated. The whole town is going to lose their minds. Let them. She looked at him, really looked at him, this strange, quiet man who'd walked into her life a week ago and turned everything upside down. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. Really? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because someone should. Because you deserve to be seen. And because watching you realize your own worth might be the most honest thing I've ever witnessed. The words hit her like a physical blow. Rhea felt her eyes burn, her throat close up. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Do what? Be what you think I am. Be someone worth this. Caleb stepped closer, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with something Rhea couldn't name. You already are, he said quietly. You just need to believe it. Then he stepped back, tipped his hat slightly, and walked away into the darkness. Rhea stood on her doorstep, her hand pressed against her racing heart, and watched him disappear around the corner. Then she went inside, locked both doors like he'd told her to, and sat down on her workbench, her whole body shaking. Tomorrow. They'd do this again tomorrow. The town would be furious, the widows would escalate, everything would get worse before it got better. But for the first time in 15 years, Rhea Dalton didn't care. She was done being invisible. The next morning, Rhea woke to find her shop window smashed. Not the display window this time, the small window in her back room, the one that faced the alley. Someone had thrown a rock through it during the night. The glass was scattered across her floor, glittering in the early morning light like malicious diamonds. On the rock was a note, written in angry handwriting, Know your place. Rhea stood in the wreckage staring at the message and felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear, not anymore. Something harder, something angrier. She was sweeping up the glass when Caleb knocked on her front door. It's open, she called, not looking up. He came in, took one look at the broken window and the rock in her hand, and his jaw went tight. When? Sometime last night. I didn't hear it happen. He took the rock from her, reading the note. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went very dark. This is my fault. No. Rhea's voice was sharper than she'd intended. This is their fault. They did this, not you. I pushed them, made them feel threatened. They were threatened by me existing. She went back to sweeping, the motion angry and precise. This was always going to happen eventually. You just gave them an excuse to do it now instead of later. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he set the rock down carefully and took the broom from her hands. What are you? Sit down. I'll finish this. I can clean up my own shop. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. He started sweeping, his movements efficient. Not alone. Rhea wanted to argue, but the fight drained out of her all at once. She sat down on her workbench, watching him clean up the mess someone had made just to hurt her. "This is going to keep happening," she said quietly. "As long as we keep whatever this is. They're going to keep trying to punish me. Then we'll keep fixing the windows." He dumped glass into her waste bin. Tin. "Until they run out of rocks or give up. And if they don't give up?" He looked at her, and his eyes were absolutely certain. "Then we leave." The words hung in the air between them. "Leave?" "The town, if it comes to that." He said it like he'd already thought it through. "You think I'm tied to this place? I'm not. My mountain's 3 days' ride from here. We could pack up and be gone before anyone noticed." "We." The word felt strange in her mouth. "You're talking like we're in this together." "Because we are." He set down the broom. "Unless you want me to stop. Unless this is too much. In which case, I'll back off. But the choice is yours, Rhea, not theirs." Rhea stared at him, her mind racing. A week ago, she'd been alone. Invisible. Safe in her invisibility, even if that safety was its own kind of prison. Now she had a broken window, enemies actively trying to destroy her, and a man offering to leave everything behind if it meant keeping her safe. It was terrifying. It was also the most alive she'd felt in years. "I want to have dinner with you tonight," she said, "and tomorrow night, and every night until you actually do have to leave." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Then that's what we'll do." He stayed for another hour, boarding up the broken window with scraps of wood from behind her shop. While he worked, Rhea made coffee. Real coffee this time, not the terrible stuff she usually drank, and they sat together in companionable silence. It felt domestic, natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. When he finally left to get glass for a proper repair, Rhea stood in her shop and looked at the boarded window, at the rock still sitting on her workbench with its cruel message. "Know your place." She picked it up, weighing it in her hand. Then she threw it in the trash with the broken glass. She knew her place. Right here, in her shop, building a life on her own terms. And if Coldwater Ridge didn't like it, they could go to hell. That afternoon, 3 customers canceled their orders. Mrs. Patterson sent her maid with a curt note saying she'd found another seamstress. The mayor's daughter-in-law picked up the half-finished christening gown and announced she'd have someone else complete it. A woman Rhea barely knew came to collect a dress she'd commissioned, took one look at the boarded window, and said she'd changed her mind about the whole thing. By 5 o'clock, Rhea had lost a quarter of her monthly income. She sat at her workbench, doing the math in her head. She could survive this month, maybe next month, but if the cancellations continued, if the widows convinced the whole town to boycott her shop, she'd be ruined by winter. The smart thing would be to end this with Caleb, apologize to the widows, fade back into invisibility, and hope they forgave her enough to throw work her way again. The smart thing. Rhea looked at her empty shop, her boarded window, her dwindling pile of commissions. Then she put on her good dress and went to meet Caleb for dinner. The boarding house was even more crowded than the night before. Word had spread, and half the town seemed to have found excuses to be there. Martha, Catherine, and Grace sat at their corner table like judges at a trial, their eyes tracking every move Rhea made. Caleb was waiting at the same table by the window. He stood when she entered, and the simple courtesy sent whispers rippling through the room. "You came," he said, and she heard the relief in his voice. "You thought I wouldn't?" "Thought you might have gotten smart." He pulled out her chair. "Glad you didn't." They ordered the same meal as before. The owner's daughter brought it with trembling hands, clearly uncomfortable being anywhere near the scandal unfolding at table 6. 3 customers canceled today, Rhea said, cutting into her chicken. She was surprised by how steady her voice was. "I'll probably lose more tomorrow." Caleb's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Because of me. Because of them. Because they think they can control me by taking away my livelihood." She met his eyes. "They're wrong." "Are they? If you lose your business, then I'll find another way. I've been sewing since I was 12. I can find work in the next town, or the one after that, or—" She stopped herself. "I'm not giving up my life because they're trying to take it." Something like pride crossed Caleb's face. "That might be the bravest thing I've ever heard." "It's not brave, it's just, I'm tired, Caleb. I'm so tired of being afraid." Her voice dropped. "And I'm tired of being alone." He reached across the table and took her hand. Just took it, right there in front of everyone, his rough fingers wrapping around hers. The whispers exploded into actual conversation. Rhea heard every word, heard shameless and desperate and pathetic, heard Martha's voice rise above the rest. She's making a spectacle of herself. She also heard Caleb's voice, low, and meant only for her. Let them talk. So she did. She sat there, holding hands with Caleb Voss in front of the entire town, and let them talk. And for the first time in her life, their words didn't touch her. They finished dinner while the room buzzed with scandal. When Caleb paid, he left twice what the meal cost, and the owner's daughter looked torn between gratitude and guilt. They walked back to Rhea's shop through streets that had gone quiet. But it wasn't a comfortable quiet. It was the quiet of people watching from behind curtains, taking notes, planning their next move. At her door, Caleb stopped. I fixed your window. Real glass this time. He hesitated. Also added a bolt to your back door, just in case. Thank you. Rhea. He turned to face her fully. You know this is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. And you're still willing to us? Yes. She cut him off. Whatever happens, I'm not backing down. Not anymore. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something that stole her breath. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers gentle against her skin. I'm leaving for the mountain in 4 days, he said quietly. Come with me. The words landed like thunder. What? Come with me. To the mountain. Leave this place and everyone in it behind. Rhea's heart stopped. Started again. Stopped. You're asking me to... I'm asking you to choose yourself. Choose a life where you don't have to fight for every scrap of respect. Where you can just exist. Be yourself. His hand was still in her hair, his thumb brushing her cheek. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I also know that staying here is going to break you eventually, and I can't watch that happen. I barely know you. You know I fixed your lock without being asked. You know I see you when no one else does. You know I'd rather have dinner with you than with anyone else in this town. His voice softened. What else do you need to know? Everything, Rhea thought, but also nothing. She knew he was honest, knew he was kind, knew he saw worth in her that she'd never seen in herself. Was that enough to leave everything behind? 4 days, she whispered. 4 days, think about it. And if the answer is no, I'll understand. But if it's yes... He stepped back, letting his hand fall. If it's yes, we'll leave before dawn and never look back. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Rhea standing in front of her shop with her world tilting sideways. Come with me. 4 days to decide if she was brave enough to choose a life she'd never imagined. 4 days to figure out if survival was enough or if she wanted something more. Rhea went inside, locked both doors, and lay awake until dawn, her mind spinning with impossible choices. Outside, Coldwater Ridge slept on, unaware that the woman they'd tried to destroy was about to make a decision that would change everything. By the next morning, Rhea still hadn't slept. She lay on her narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, running through the same impossible calculation over and over. Leave everything, her shop, her small measure of independence, the town that had been cruel but familiar, for a mountain she'd never seen with a man she'd known for barely a week. It was insane. It was also the only thing that made sense. She got up as gray light filtered through her window, splashed water on her face, and tried to focus on work. She had 2 projects left, a simple mending job and a coat that needed new buttons. Small things. Things that wouldn't matter if she disappeared. The thought sent a chill through her. Disappear. Is that what she'd be doing, or would she finally be appearing somewhere she actually mattered? She was attaching the second button when someone pounded on her door hard enough to rattle the frame. Rhea's heart jumped. She set down her work and went to the door, peering through the gap in the curtain first. Martha Brennan stood on her doorstep with Catherine Walsh and 2 men Rhea didn't recognize. Martha's face was set in hard lines, all pretense of civility gone. Rhea opened the door but didn't step back. Mrs. Brennan, we need to talk. Martha's voice was clipped. Inside. I don't think... It wasn't a request. Martha pushed past her, Catherine and the 2 men following. Rhea's shop suddenly felt very small and very threatened. She left the door open, some instinct telling her she might need to run. You've made quite a spectacle of yourself, Martha said, turning to face her. 3 nights of public displays with Caleb Voss. Do you have any idea what you're doing to this town's reputation? I'm having dinner, that's all. That's not all, and you know it. Catherine stepped forward, her pretty face twisted with anger. You're trying to trap him, playing on his sympathy, making him think you're something you're not. I haven't lied to him about anything. Your entire existence is a lie, Martha snapped. Pretending you belong here, pretending you're good enough to… She caught herself, took a breath. We're here to make you an offer. That surprised Rhea enough that she went quiet. Martha pulled an envelope from her bag and set it on the workbench. $500, enough to start over somewhere else, somewhere you might actually fit in. Rhea stared at the envelope. $500 was more money than she'd see in 2 years of sewing. You're paying me to leave. We're helping you make a smart decision, Catherine said. You can't actually believe Caleb Voss wants you. Not really. He's being kind, maybe, or curious. But eventually he'll see you for what you are, and then where will you be? Humiliated, ruined, with nothing. Take the money, one of the men said. He was older, with a merchant's soft hands and calculating eyes. Leave town quietly. Everyone wins. Everyone meaning you. Everyone meaning this town doesn't have to watch you embarrass yourself further. Martha's voice softened slightly, taking on a tone that might have been mistaken for kindness. Rhea, be realistic. What can you possibly offer a man like that? You have no family, no connections, no prospects. You're not… She gestured vaguely at Rhea's body. You're not the kind of woman men choose when they have other options. The word should have hurt. A week ago, they would have destroyed her. But Rhea looked at Martha's expensive dress, her confident posture, her absolute certainty that she was right, and felt nothing but pity. Get out of my shop. Martha blinked. Excuse me? I said get out. Take your money and your opinions and get out. You're making a mistake. That's my mistake to make. Rhea walked to the door and held it open. Leave, now. The 2 men looked at Martha, uncertain. Catherine's face had gone red. You stupid girl, Catherine hissed. You have no idea what you're turning down. No idea what we could do to you. Then do it. Rhea's voice was steady. Do whatever you're going to do. But do it honestly, without pretending you're trying to help me. You want me gone because I'm competition, because a man looked at me instead of you and it broke something in your pretty little worldview. So stop pretending this is charity and admit what it really is. Spite. Martha's mask of civility shattered. You think you've won something? You think Caleb Voss choosing you means anything? He'll use you and leave you, and when he does, this town will still be here. And we'll remember exactly how you treated us. Good. Rhea met her eyes. Remember it. Remember that I said no, that I chose dignity over your blood money. And when Caleb and I are gone, remember that you spent $500 trying to buy something you could never have. His respect. Martha's hand came up fast. Rhea saw the slap coming but didn't move, didn't flinch. The crack echoed through the shop. Her cheek burned. Her eyes watered, but she didn't step back. Feel better? Rhea asked quietly. Martha was breathing hard, her hand still raised, her face white with rage. You'll regret this. I swear to you. Mrs. Brennan. Everyone turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, his expression absolutely cold. Rhea had no idea how long he'd been there or how much he'd heard, but from the look on his face, it was enough. Mr. Voss, Martha lowered her hand, trying to salvage some composure. We were just leaving. He stepped into the shop and the 2 men immediately moved toward the door. All of you, now. You don't understand what she… I understand perfectly. His voice was low and dangerous. I understand you came here to bribe and threaten someone I care about. I understand you just struck her. And I understand that if you're still in this shop in 10 seconds, I'm going to forget I'm supposed to be civilized. Catherine grabbed Martha's arm. Come on, he's not worth it. They left in a rush of rustling skirts and muttered insults. The envelope stayed on the workbench, forgotten. When they were gone, Caleb closed the door and turned to Rhea. His eyes went straight to her cheek, which she knew was already turning red. Did she hurt you? No. Rhea's voice came out shakier than she wanted. I'm fine. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides and tilted her face toward the light, examining the mark Martha had left. His jaw was so tight Rhea could see the muscle jumping. That's the second time in 2 days they've come after you. Third, if you count the window. I'm counting everything. He let go of her face but didn't step back. This is escalating. They're not going to stop. I know. Then you know what you have to do. Rhea met his eyes. Run away? Choose yourself. He picked up the envelope, hefted it. How much did they offer? 500. He opened it, counted the bills, then walked to her small stove and dropped the whole thing into the fire. The money caught instantly, curling and blackening. Caleb! You're not for sale. He watched the bills burn. And they need to learn that. Rhea stared at the flames consuming $500, feeling something fierce and wild rise in her chest. She should be angry, should be horrified at the waste. Instead, she wanted to laugh. You just burned $500. Wasn't mine to burn. Wasn't yours either. He turned back to her. That money came with chains. Better to burn it than let it touch you. The last bill crumbled to ash. Caleb closed the stove door and looked at Rhea with an intensity that made her breath catch. I'm leaving in 3 days, he said. I need to know if you're coming with me. I still haven't decided. Then decide. He moved closer. Because whatever you choose, you need to know something first. This isn't going to stop. They're going to keep pushing until you break or leave. Those are your only 2 options if you stay here. And if I go with you? Then you choose a third option. You choose a life where you don't have to fight every day just to exist, where you can breathe without permission. His voice softened. I can't promise it'll be easy. Life on the mountain is hard, but it's honest, and you won't have to spend every moment proving you deserve to be there. What are you offering, Caleb? Really? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, partnership. Someone to build a life with. Someone who sees you clearly and wants you anyway. He paused. And if that turns into something more, something deeper, I won't fight it. But even if it doesn't, you'll have a home. You'll have safety. You'll have someone who gives a damn whether you survive. Rhea's throat went tight. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're strong enough to survive 15 years in a town that hates you. I know you care about your work enough to do it right, even when no one's watching. I know you stood up to 4 people trying to buy your dignity and told them to go to hell. He stepped closer still, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him. That's enough. The rest we'll figure out together. I'm scared. Good. You should be. This is terrifying. His mouth quirked slightly. But you've been terrified every day for 15 years and you're still standing. At least this time, you'd be terrified and free. Rhea looked at him, really looked at him. At the quiet certainty in his eyes, the solid presence of him, the way he stood in her shop like he belonged there, like she belonged somewhere too. 3 days, she whispered. 3 days. Then I'm leaving with or without you. But I really hope it's with you. He left before she could respond, the bell above her door chiming softly in his wake. Rhea stood in her empty shop, her cheeks still stinging from Martha's slap, the smell of burned money lingering in the air, and tried to imagine a life that didn't include this place. It should have been impossible. Instead, it felt like the first real possibility she'd had in years. That night, Rhea didn't go to the boarding house for dinner. She stayed in her shop, working by lamplight, and tried to think clearly. But thinking clearly was impossible when every logical thought led back to the same conclusion. Staying meant slow destruction. Leaving meant leaping into complete unknown. There had to be a middle path, some way to keep her shop and her independence while also having Caleb in her life. Some compromise that didn't require burning everything down. But every time she tried to map out that middle path, it crumbled under the weight of reality. Martha and the widows wouldn't stop. The town wouldn't suddenly become kind. And Caleb wouldn't stay forever. He'd already been here longer than usual, and the mountain was calling him back. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the smoke. The smell hit her first, sharp and acrid, wrong in a way that sent immediate alarm through her system. Rhea's head snapped up, and she saw it, thin tendrils of smoke seeping under her back door. Her heart stopped. Fire. She ran to the back room, yanked open the door, and was driven back by a wall of heat and smoke. The alley behind her shop was full of flames, fed by something that burned fast and hot. Through the smoke, she could just make out the shape of her small storage shed, where she kept fabric, supplies, everything she'd need to rebuild if something happened to the shop. It was fully engulfed. Rhea stumbled back, her mind racing. The shed was too far gone to save, but the fire was close enough to her shop that if the wind shifted, she ran to the front, threw open the door, and screamed for help. "Fire! Someone help! Fire!" The street was dark and quiet. Too quiet. Where was everyone? Rhea ran back inside, grabbed what she could, her most valuable tools, the lockbox where she kept her savings, and threw them into the street. The smoke was getting thicker, seeping through every crack in the back wall. "Rhea!" She turned to see Caleb running toward her, his face illuminated by the growing flames. Behind him, other people were emerging from houses, finally responding to her screams. "The shed's on fire!" she gasped. "I can't. The wind—" "Get back." He pushed her toward the street, then turned to the gathering crowd. "Need water, buckets, anything. Form a line." People moved slowly, reluctantly. Rhea saw Martha in the crowd, her face carefully neutral. Saw Catherine whispering to someone. Saw too many people watching with something that looked like satisfaction. "Now!" Caleb's voice cracked like a whip, and finally people started moving. They formed a bucket line from the town well, passing water hand to hand. It was chaos, unorganized, too slow, hampered by people who clearly weren't trying their hardest. But gradually, with Caleb directing and doing the work of 3 men, they got the fire under control. By the time it was out, the shed was gone. Just a smoking pile of ash and ruined dreams. The back wall of Rhea's shop was scorched black but intact. Rhea stood in the street, covered in soot, watching what was left of her business burn down to nothing. Caleb appeared beside her, equally filthy. "You hurt?" She shook her head. She couldn't speak. Couldn't process what had just happened. The shed was full of accelerant. His voice was flat. Someone wanted it to burn hot and fast. Rhea turned to look at him. "Someone set this? Look at the burn pattern. Look at where it started." He pointed to the remains. This wasn't an accident. The crowd was dispersing now, people drifting back to their homes with murmured conversations. Rhea caught Martha's eye across the street. The older woman held her gaze for a moment, her expression unreadable, then turned and walked away. "They burned my shed," Rhea said numbly. "They actually burned it. Not they. Someone." Caleb's hand found hers. "But yes, someone burned it. And they'll say it was an accident, or that you were careless, or that it's just bad luck. And everyone will believe them because that's easier than admitting what this town really is." Rhea looked at the ruins of her storage, at the scorched back of her shop, at the faces of her neighbors as they abandoned her to deal with the aftermath alone. Something inside her broke. Or maybe it had been breaking for days and this was just the final crack. "I'll come with you," she said. Caleb went still. "What?" "To the mountain. I'll come with you." She turned to face him, and her voice was steady. "I'm done. I'm done fighting for scraps in a place that wants me dead. I'm done trying to be small enough that they'll tolerate me. I'm done. Rhea, I'll need a day to pack, to decide what to take and what to leave." She looked back at her shop. "Not that there's much left to take." "You're sure?" "No." She laughed, and it came out half broken. "I'm not sure of anything except that staying here will kill me eventually. If not my body, then everything that makes me who I am. So yes, I'll come with you, and we'll figure out the rest later." Caleb pulled her into his arms, right there in the street, not caring who saw. Rhea buried her face in his chest, breathing in smoke and sweat and something that felt impossibly like safety. 2 days, he said into her hair. "Dawn. We'll leave before anyone knows we're gone." 2 days, she agreed. They stood there while the last embers died, holding each other in the ruins of everything Rhea had built and planning their escape. The next day, Rhea worked like someone possessed. She sorted through everything she owned, dividing it into 3 piles: essential, valuable, and leave behind. The essential pile was depressingly small: clothes, tools, a few personal items. The valuable pile was slightly larger: fabric she could sell, finished pieces she could trade, her best sewing equipment. The leave behind pile was everything else: 15 years of accumulation, 15 years of trying to build a life in a place that would never accept her. She was folding her third dress when Maggie appeared in the doorway. "So it's true." Maggie's voice was soft. "You're leaving." Rhea didn't ask how she knew. News traveled fast in Coldwater Ridge, especially bad news. "Yes." "With him." "With Caleb Voss." "Yes." Maggie came inside, closing the door behind her. "Do you love him?" The question caught Rhea off guard. She sat down on her cot, the dress forgotten in her hands. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe. Or maybe I could. Or maybe what I feel is just gratitude for being seen. I don't know, Maggie. I just know that staying here is impossible, and going with him feels like the only real choice I've ever had." "He could be terrible. He could be lying about everything." "He could." Rhea met her friend's eyes. "But I don't think he is. And even if he is, even if the mountain is horrible and I hate every minute of it, at least it'll be my choice. At least I'll be somewhere I chose to be instead of somewhere I'm just enduring." Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled a small cloth bag from her apron and set it on the workbench. "What's this?" "Money, not much, $30, everything I've saved." Maggie held up a hand when Rhea started to protest. "Don't. Just take it. Use it to start over, wherever you end up." "Maggie, please." Maggie's eyes were bright with tears. "Please let me help you. Let me do this one thing." Rhea stood and hugged her friend, both of them crying now. "Thank you." "Write to me? If you can. I know you'll be on a mountain in the middle of nowhere, but if you ever get to a town, if you ever have a chance, I'll write. I promise." They held each other for a long moment. Then Maggie pulled back, wiping her eyes. "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow, dawn." "Then I'll say goodbye now. I don't think I could handle watching you actually go." Maggie squeezed her hands. "Be happy, Rhea. Be so happy that it makes all of this worth it." After Maggie left, Rhea added the $30 to her small savings and went back to packing. The shop felt different now. Not like a prison she was escaping, but like a life she was leaving behind. A failed life, maybe, but still hers. She was taking down her shop sign when she heard boots on the boardwalk. Martha Brennan stood outside, alone this time, her face carefully composed. "Come to gloat?" Rhea asked, not bothering to hide her bitterness. "I came to apologize." That was unexpected enough that Rhea actually stopped what she was doing. Apologize. For the slap, for the threats, for... Martha gestured vaguely. All of it. But not for the fire. Martha's face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Rhea went back to her packing. "Is there anything else?" "You're really leaving with him." "Yes." "You're making a mistake." "So you keep saying." Martha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What makes you think you deserve him?" The question was asked without malice, just genuine confusion, as if Martha truly couldn't understand what Caleb saw in Rhea. Rhea turned to face her, and when she spoke, her voice was calm. "I don't think I deserve him. I think he chose me, and I'm choosing him back. That's all. No deserving required." She paused. "You keep asking what I can offer him, what makes me good enough, what I bring to the table. But you're asking the wrong questions." "What are the right questions?" "Does he make me feel safe? Does he see me clearly? Do I want to build a life with him?" Rhea met Martha's eyes. "And the answer to all of those is yes. That's enough." Martha's perfect composure cracked slightly. "You think you're better than us?" "No. I think I'm different from you. I think I've spent 15 years learning to survive on scraps, while you've spent 15 years taking for granted that you'll always have everything you want. And I think that difference terrifies you." "I'm not terrified of you." "Yes, you are. Because if I can be chosen, if I can be wanted despite being everything this town says isn't valuable, then maybe your position isn't as secure as you thought. Maybe beauty and status and all the things you've relied on aren't actually guarantees." Rhea's voice softened. "I don't hate you, Martha. I pity you. Because you'll spend your whole life trying to be enough for people whose opinions don't matter. And you'll never figure out that the only person you need to be enough for is yourself." She picked up her pack and walked out of the shop without looking back. Behind her, Martha stood in the ruins of what used to be Rhea's life and said nothing at all. Rhea spent her last night in Coldwater Ridge, finishing her preparations. She worked methodically, packing everything essential into 2 bags she could carry. Everything else, the furniture, the leftover fabric, the shop itself, she'd leave behind. Let the landlord sell it, keep it, burn it for all she cared. Around midnight, there was a soft knock at her back door. Rhea opened it to find Caleb standing in the alley, a lantern in one hand. "Checking to make sure you haven't changed your mind," he said. "I haven't." "Good." He stepped inside, looking around at the half-empty room. "How are you doing with all this?" "Honestly, I don't know." Rhea sat down on her cot. "I keep waiting to feel sad, to mourn what I'm leaving, but all I feel is ready. That's not a bad thing, isn't it? Shouldn't I be more conflicted about abandoning my whole life? Was it really your life, or was it just where you existed while waiting for your life to start?" He sat down beside her, the cot creaking under his weight. "You're not abandoning anything, Rhea. You're choosing something. There's a difference." She leaned against him, letting her head rest on his shoulder. It felt natural. "Right. What if I hate the mountain? Then we'll figure something else out. What if I'm terrible at surviving out there? Then I'll teach you. That's what partnership means. What if, Rhea?" He turned to face her, his hands on her shoulders. "Stop borrowing trouble. We'll figure it out as it comes, together." She looked at him in the lamplight, this quiet man who'd walked into her life and offered her a future she'd never imagined. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you actually want me, or do you just want to save me?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Both. I want you because you're worth wanting, and I want to save you because you deserve saving. Those aren't contradictory. But if I wasn't in danger, if the town wasn't cruel, would you still—" "Yes." He cut her off. "I saw you before any of this started. Saw you through your window, working, caring, being yourself. That's what I wanted. The danger just made it urgent." Rhea felt something in her chest uncurl. "Okay? Okay? Okay, I believe you." She managed a small smile. "Don't make me regret that." "I won't." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Get some sleep. We leave in 6 hours. It's a long ride to the mountain." After he left, Rhea lay down on her cot for the last time and stared at the ceiling. In 6 hours, she'd leave Coldwater Ridge behind forever. Leave her shop, her few friends, the only life she'd ever known. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something that might have been hope. She fell asleep with her bags packed and her future waiting, and didn't dream at all. The sky was just starting to lighten when Caleb's quiet knock woke her. Rhea was already dressed. She grabbed her 2 bags, took one last look around the shop that had been her whole world, and walked out without looking back. Caleb was waiting with 2 horses, both already loaded with supplies. He took her bags, securing them to the pack horse with practiced efficiency. "Ready?" Rhea looked back at Coldwater Ridge, sleeping and unaware in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere in those houses were the widows who'd tried to destroy her, the neighbors who'd watched it happen, the whole town that had spent 15 years teaching her she was worthless. "Ready?" she said. Caleb helped her mount. She was clumsy at it, had never ridden much, and swung onto his own horse with easy grace. They rode out of town as the sun broke over the ridge, painting everything gold. Rhea didn't look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing. Only forward, only the mountain, only the future she'd chosen. And riding beside her, solid and certain, the man who'd seen her when she was invisible and offered her a life worth living. The town faded behind them, and Rhea Dalton rode toward her new life without a single regret. The first day of riding nearly broke her. Rhea had ridden horses before, but never for hours at a stretch. Never across terrain that shifted from flat grassland to rolling hills to the beginning of real mountain country. By noon, every muscle in her body was screaming. By afternoon, she was gritting her teeth against tears. Caleb noticed. Of course he noticed. "We'll stop soon," he said, guiding his horse closer to hers. "There's a creek about a mile ahead. Good place to water the horses and rest." Rhea nodded, not trusting her voice. She was determined not to complain. Not to be the burden she was already terrified of becoming. The creek, when they reached it, was exactly what he'd promised. Clear water running over smooth stones. surrounded by cottonwood trees that provided shade from the relentless sun. Caleb dismounted easily and came to help her down. The moment her feet hit the ground, her legs gave out. Caleb caught her before she hit the dirt, his arms solid around her waist. Easy. I'm fine. The lie was automatic. You're not fine. You can barely stand. He guided her to a fallen log and made her sit. Stay here. He tended to the horses while Rhea sat and tried not to feel useless. Her whole body ached, her thighs, her back, her hands from gripping the reins too hard. She watched Caleb work, his movements efficient and practiced, and wondered what she'd been thinking. She wasn't built for this, wasn't strong enough, fit enough, capable enough. Stop it, Caleb said without turning around. Stop what? Whatever you're thinking. I can hear you spiraling from here. He finished with the horses and came to sit beside her, handing her a canteen. Drink! She drank. The water was cold and tasted faintly of metal. I'm slowing you down, she said quietly. You're learning. There's a difference. You could have made it to the mountain in 2 days by yourself. With me, it'll take, what, 4? 5? 6, probably. He said it without judgment, just fact. And that's fine, we're not in a hurry. I'm not cut out for this. Not yet, but you will be. He took the canteen back, drank. First time I came to the mountain, I could barely make it up the first ridge. Threw up twice, thought I was dying. Took me 3 weeks to stop feeling like my lungs were on fire every time I climbed. Rhea looked at him. Really? Really? Nobody's born knowing how to survive out here. You learn or you die. And you're not going to die because I'm going to teach you. He stood, offered his hand. Come on, let's get you in the creek. What? Cold water. Best thing for sore muscles. He pulled her up. Trust me. The water was shockingly cold. Rhea gasped when she stepped in, her boots immediately soaking through. But Caleb was right. After the initial shock, the cold felt good against her aching legs. They stood in the creek together, the water running around their ankles, and Rhea felt some of the tension drain out of her. How long before I stop being terrible at this? She asked. Week? Maybe 2? He bent down, splashed water on his face. But terrible is relative. You're doing better than most people would on their first day. I can barely walk. But you're still here, still moving. That's what matters. He looked at her, water dripping from his hair. The mountain doesn't care if you're graceful. It only cares if you're stubborn enough to keep going. They camped that night under stars so thick and bright Rhea had never seen anything like them. Caleb built a fire, made coffee that tasted like dirt but was hot and strong, and showed her how to arrange her bedroll to minimize the rocks digging into her back. Tomorrow will be harder, he said, settling into his own bedroll on the opposite side of the fire. Terrain gets rougher from here. Of course it does. Rhea stared up at the stars, her body one giant bruise. Can I ask you something? Always. Why didn't you just marry one of the widows? It would have been easier, more practical. He was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, I don't want easy. I want real. What does that mean? It means I spent 8 years on a mountain learning to tell the difference between what looks good and what actually matters. Martha Brennan looks good. Catherine Walsh looks good. They'd be easy wives for an easy life. He rolled onto his side to face her across the fire. But I'd wake up every morning next to someone playing a role, someone performing. I'd rather have someone who's honest, even if honest is harder. I'm not sure honesty is my best quality right now. I'm mostly just scared. Being scared and admitting it is honest. Being scared and pretending you're not, that's performance. He poked at the fire with a stick. You're the most honest person I've met in years, Rhea. Don't lose that trying to be what you think I want. She fell asleep to the sound of the fire crackling and Caleb's steady breathing and dreamed of mountains she'd never seen. The second day was worse. They climbed, actually climbed, the horses laboring up switchbacks while Rhea clung to her saddle and tried not to look down. Her legs had stiffened overnight, every movement sending fresh pain through muscles she didn't know she had. But she didn't complain, didn't ask to stop, just kept moving because stopping felt like admitting defeat. Around midday, they came to a narrow pass between 2 rock faces. Caleb stopped his horse, studying the ground. What is it? Rhea asked. Tracks. fresh. He dismounted, examining the dirt. Bear, maybe, or mountain lion. Ria's stomach dropped. Should we go back? No, they're old enough that whatever made them is long gone. But stay close. He remounted, pulling his rifle from its scabbard. And stay quiet. They rode through the pass in tense silence. Ria kept scanning the rocks above them, expecting to see eyes watching, teeth waiting. Nothing appeared, but the fear stayed with her for hours after they'd cleared the pass. That night, Caleb taught her how to build a proper fire. Not the decorative thing she'd made in her shop stove, but a real working fire that would keep them warm and cook their food and maybe keep predators at bay. Her hands were clumsy, the kindling kept slipping, and it took her 6 tries to get the spark to catch. But when the flames finally took hold, she felt a small surge of pride. Not bad, Caleb said, settling down beside her. Few more weeks and you'll be doing that in the dark. Few more weeks and I'll be dead from exhaustion. Nah, you're tougher than you think. He handed her a tin plate with beans and salted meat. Eat. You need the strength. The food was plain and a little burned, but Ria ate every bite. She was hungry in a way she'd never been in Coldwater Ridge. A deep, bone-tired hunger that came from actually using her body instead of just sitting at a workbench all day. Can I ask you something else? She said, scraping the last of the beans from her plate. You keep asking permission. You don't need it. What happened with your family? Why are you alone on a mountain? His face closed slightly. That's a long story. We've got time. He was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. Then he said, Had a brother, younger. We worked our father's farm together down in the valley. When our parents died, we were supposed to split it, work it together. He paused. He wanted to expand, take on debt to buy more land, more equipment. I wanted to keep it small, manageable. We fought about it for 2 years. What happened? He bought out my half with money he didn't have, went into debt up to his neck. I took my share and left. His voice was flat. Last I heard, he'd lost the farm to the bank. Don't know where he is now. Don't particularly care to find out. That's why you went to the mountain, because your brother chose land over family? I went to the mountain because I was tired of people choosing things over people, profit over partnership, image over integrity. The mountain doesn't lie, doesn't perform. It just is. He looked at her. Same reason I chose you, I guess. You just are. No pretense. Ria felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry about your brother. Don't be. He made his choice. I made mine. We both have to live with them. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Then Caleb stood and pulled something from his saddlebag, a small wooden box. Here, he said, handing it to her. Wedding present. Ria stared at the box. Wedding? We need to make this official, before we get to the mountain. He sat back down. I've been thinking about it. If something happens to me, if I get hurt or killed, you need to be able to prove you belong there. That the cabin, the land, everything, it's yours too. Otherwise, you'd be stranded with nothing. Caleb, we don't have to... Open the box. She opened it. Inside was a simple silver ring, worn smooth with age. It was my mother's, he said quietly. Only thing of value I kept when I left. Been carrying it for 8 years, waiting for... He stopped. Waiting for you, I guess. Ria's hands were shaking. This is too fast. We barely know each other. I know, but I also know that waiting doesn't make sense out here. Time moves different on the mountain. You commit or you don't. There's no middle ground. What if we're making a mistake? Then we'll make it together. He took the ring from the box and held it out to her. I'm not asking you to love me. Not yet. I'm asking you to partner with me, to build a life together and see what happens. If it turns into something more, good. If it doesn't, we'll still have each other's backs. Either way, you're not alone. Ria looked at the ring, at Caleb's steady gray eyes, at the fire and the darkness beyond it. Every logical thought told her this was insane. They'd known each other for barely 2 weeks. She didn't know his favorite color, or how he took his coffee, or what made him laugh, but she knew he'd fixed her lock without being asked. Knew he'd burned $500 rather than let her be bought. Knew he'd offered her a future when she'd had none. Sometimes love was built slowly over years of knowing someone, and sometimes it was built in the choosing. Ask me properly, she said. He blinked. What? If we're doing this, do it right. Ask me to marry you." A smile ghosted across his face. He got down on one knee in the dirt, still holding the ring. "Rhea Dalton, will you marry me?" "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. They sat together by the fire, newly engaged, and Rhea felt the weight of the ring on her hand, solid and real and terrifying. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow. There's a trading post about 6 hours from here. Man who runs it is licensed to perform marriages. We'll stop there, make it legal, then push on to the mountain." "That simple?" "That's simple." Rhea looked at the ring, turning her hand in the firelight. She was going to marry a man she barely knew, on a journey to a place she'd never seen, leaving behind everything familiar. It should have felt like the end of something. Instead, it felt like the beginning. The trading post was a rough collection of buildings huddled at the base of a granite cliff. The man who ran it was called Samuel, a grizzled 60-year-old who looked like he'd been carved from the same stone as the mountain. "Caleb Voss," Samuel said, gripping Caleb's hand. "Figured you'd be back through before winter. Who's this?" "Rhea Dalton. She's—" Caleb paused. "We're getting married. Today, if you're willing." Samuel's eyebrows went up. He looked at Rhea, taking in her rumpled travel clothes, her sunburned face, the exhaustion in her eyes. "You sure about this, miss?" "No," Rhea said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." Samuel laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Good enough. Let me get my book." The ceremony took 5 minutes. Samuel read from a battered book, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone so rough around the edges. Caleb repeated the words with the same steady certainty he did everything else. When it was Rhea's turn, her voice shook, but she got through it. "By the authority vested in me by the territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb, you can kiss your bride if you're so inclined." Caleb looked at Rhea, a question in his eyes. She nodded. The kiss was brief, almost chaste. His lips were warm and dry, and when he pulled back, Rhea saw something in his expression that might have been wonder. "Well," Samuel said, closing his book, "that's done. You staying the night? If you have room." "Always got room for you." Samuel looked at Rhea again. "You know what you're getting into, heading up that mountain with him?" "Not really." "Good. Knowing too much just makes you scared." He clapped Caleb on the shoulder. "She'll learn or she won't. Either way, it's her choice now." They stayed in a small cabin Samuel kept for travelers. It had 2 rooms, one with a bed, one with a table and stove. Samuel left them alone, disappearing back to the main building. Rhea stood in the cabin, newly married, and felt the weight of what she'd just done settle over her. "You can have the bed," Caleb said, setting down their bags. "I'll take the floor. We're married." "I know, but that doesn't mean—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not expecting anything, Rhea. This marriage is for practical reasons, to protect you. You don't owe me anything just because we said some words." Rhea looked at him, this strange, honest man who'd just married her and was now offering to sleep on the floor like they were strangers. "I'm terrified," she said quietly. "Of me?" "Of everything. Of not being good enough, of failing at this, of—" She gestured vaguely. "All of it." He crossed the room and took her hands in his. "You want to know what I'm terrified of?" "What?" "That you'll wake up one day and realize you could have done better. That you'll look at this life and see all the things you gave up instead of what you gained." His grip tightened slightly. "I'm not a rich man, Rhea. I can't give you fancy dresses or social standing or any of the things women are supposed to want. All I can give you is honesty and partnership and a life that's yours to build." "That's more than anyone else ever offered me." "Maybe, but it's still just survival, and you deserve more than that." Rhea thought about Coldwater Ridge, about her tiny shop and her narrower life, about 15 years of being invisible while desperately trying to be seen. "Survival is more than I had before," she said, "and we can build the rest as we go." That night they shared the bed but stayed on opposite sides, a careful distance between them. Rhea lay awake for a long time, listening to Caleb's breathing, even out into sleep, the ring on her finger feeling both foreign and right. She was married, to a man she'd known for 2 weeks, on her way to a mountain she'd never seen. It was completely insane, It was also the first thing that had felt truly hers in years. The next 2 days of travel blurred together into an endless cycle of riding, stopping, riding again. The terrain got rougher, the air thinner, the temperatures colder at night. Ria's body adapted slowly, painfully. The saddle sores that had formed the first day turned into calluses. Her soft hands developed blisters that popped and hardened. Her lungs learned to pull oxygen from air that seemed to have less of it with every mile they climbed. Caleb watched her struggle and said nothing, just offered help when she needed it, and space when she didn't. He showed her how to read the sky for weather, how to find water, how to tell which plants were safe to eat and which would kill her. She learned. Not gracefully, not easily, but she learned. On the 5th day, they rounded a bend in the trail, and Caleb stopped his horse. "There," he said, pointing. Ria looked up and saw it for the first time, Caleb's mountain. It rose against the sky like something from a dream, its peak still capped with snow even though it was late summer. The lower slopes were covered in pine forest so thick it looked black from a distance. "How much farther?" she asked. 3 hours, maybe 4. He looked at her. "You ready?" Ria took a deep breath of the thin mountain air and thought about everything she'd left behind. The shop, the town, the life that had been slowly killing her. "Ready," she said. They rode toward the mountain as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. And for the first time since leaving Coldwater Ridge, Ria felt something that might have been peace. The cabin appeared suddenly, nestled in a clearing surrounded by massive pines. It was smaller than Ria had imagined, just one large room with a sleeping loft, a stone fireplace taking up one wall, windows with real glass facing east and south. But it was solid, well-built, clearly maintained with care. "Home," Caleb said simply, dismounting. "Home." The word felt strange. Ria had never really had a home, just places she'd existed while waiting for life to happen. She slid off her horse, her legs immediately protesting. Caleb caught her elbow, steadying her. "Let me show you around before it gets dark." The cabin was sparse but functional. A large bed took up one corner covered with furs and wool blankets. Shelves lined the walls, filled with supplies and tools. The fireplace had a cooking grate and several pots hanging from hooks. A table and 2 chairs sat under the southern window. "It's not much," Caleb said, watching her take it in. "It's more than I had." Ria ran her hand along the smooth edge of the table. "You built all this?" "Most of it. Some I traded for." He opened a cabinet, revealing neatly stacked dishes and cups. "There's a creek about 50 yards east, good water year-round. Storage shed out back for meat and supplies. I've got traps set in a circuit about 3 miles around. Usually check them every other day." Ria listened to him describe the routine of his life, the practical details of survival, and tried to picture herself fitting into it. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Whatever you can. Whatever you want." He closed the cabinet. "I'm not bringing you here to be my servant, Ria. This is your home too. We'll figure out how to divide the work based on what makes sense." "I don't know how to do any of this. Trapping, hunting, any of it." "You'll learn. Same way you learn to ride." He built a fire in the fireplace with practiced efficiency. "For now, just rest. You've been traveling for 6 days. You're exhausted." Ria wanted to argue, to prove she could contribute immediately, but her body overruled her pride. She sank into one of the chairs and watched Caleb move around the cabin, lighting lamps, unpacking supplies, making the space come alive. He made dinner, venison stew with wild onions and potatoes he'd stored in the shed. It was simple but good, better than anything Ria had eaten on the trail. "Where will I sleep?" she asked, watching the loft. Caleb paused. "Where do you want to sleep?" The question hung between them, weighted with everything they hadn't discussed. They were married, but it was a marriage of convenience, of protection, not love. Not yet, anyway. "I don't know what the rules are here," Ria said quietly. "What you expect." "No rules, no expectations." He set down his bowl. "The bed's big enough for 2. We can share it the way we did at the trading post, separate but together. Or I can rig a curtain, give you privacy. Or I can sleep in the loft and you take the bed. Your choice." Ria thought about it, about the practical warmth of sharing a bed in a cabin that would get cold at night, about the strange comfort of having someone nearby after 6 days of learning to trust him. "We'll share," she said. Like before. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. Okay. That night they lay on opposite sides of the big bed, the space between them both vast and insignificant. Outside, the wind moved through the pines with a sound like the ocean. Animals called to each other in voices Rhea didn't recognize. The mountains settled around them, dark and alive and utterly foreign. "Caleb?" she whispered into the darkness. "Yeah? Thank you for bringing me here, for giving me a chance to—" She struggled for words. "To be something other than what I was." "You were always something, Rhea. You just needed room to figure out what." She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing and the wind in the trees, and dreamed of roots growing deep into mountain soil. The first week was brutal. Caleb woke before dawn every day and expected Rhea to do the same. There was water to haul, wood to split, traps to check, food to prepare. Everything was harder at altitude, in cold air, with hands that weren't used to this kind of work. Rhea's body, which had just started adapting to riding, was shocked into new kinds of pain. Her shoulders ached from carrying water, her hands blistered from the axe, her lungs burned with every climb. But she didn't complain, didn't ask for easier tasks, just kept working, kept learning, kept pushing herself past what she thought she could handle. Caleb watched her struggle and sometimes stepped in to help, sometimes let her figure it out alone. He was teaching her, she realized, not just how to survive, but how to be strong. On the 8th day, Rhea successfully split wood for 20 minutes without stopping. It wasn't much. Caleb could work for hours. But it was progress. "Good," he said, taking the axe from her shaking hands. "You're getting stronger." "I feel like I'm dying." "That means it's working." He demonstrated a better grip on the axe handle. "Here, like this. Use your whole body, not just your arms." She tried again, and this time the wood split clean on the first swing. "There," Caleb said, and she heard approval in his voice. "You're learning." That night, Rhea's hands were so blistered she could barely hold her fork. Caleb disappeared into the storage shed and came back with a tin of something that smelled like pine and beeswax. "Give me your hands." She held them out, palms up, the blisters red and angry. Caleb sat across from her and began applying the salve with gentle fingers, his rough hands surprisingly careful. "This will hurt tomorrow," he said, "but it'll help them heal faster." Rhea watched him work. This man who was technically her husband, but still felt like a stranger in so many ways. He was patient with her failures, generous with his knowledge, never making her feel stupid for not knowing things he'd learned over years. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Always." "Do you regret it? Bringing me here?" His hand stilled. "No. Why would I?" "Because I'm slow. Because I don't know anything. Because you could have had someone who already knew how to do all this." "I could have had someone who knew how to survive. But I wanted someone who wanted to learn. There's a difference." He finished with the salve and capped the tin. "You're doing better than you think, Rhea. Stop measuring yourself against where I am and start measuring against where you were 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks ago, she'd been in Coldwater Ridge, invisible and alone. Now she was on a mountain, married to a man who saw her worth, learning to be someone she'd never imagined. When she measured against that, she was doing fine. The seasons changed, and Rhea changed with them. Fall came to the mountain in a rush of color, aspens turning gold, the air taking on a sharp edge that promised winter. Caleb taught her to preserve food, to read animal tracks, to move through the forest without making noise. She learned which plants were medicinal and which were poison. Learned to skin a rabbit without wasting meat. Learned to start a fire with damp wood. Her body transformed. The softness that had defined her in Coldwater Ridge gave way to muscle. Her hands grew calloused and capable. Her lungs adapted to the thin air. She could split wood for an hour without stopping, haul water without her shoulders screaming, hike the trapline without needing to rest every 50 yards. And somewhere in the learning, in the daily rhythm of survival, something else began to grow. She started noticing small things about Caleb, the way he always made sure she ate first, the way he'd leave the warmest spot by the fire for her, the way his eyes would track her movements around the cabin like he was checking that she was okay, that she was safe, that she was still there. One night in late October, the first real snow fell. They sat by the fire, Rhea mending one of Caleb's shirts while he carved a new handle for a knife, and she realized she was happy, not just surviving. Happy. "What are you smiling about?" Caleb asked, not looking up from his carving. "Nothing. Everything." She tied off the thread. "I was just thinking that I don't miss Coldwater Ridge at all. Not even a little bit." "Good. That place didn't deserve you. No one there even knows where I went. I just disappeared." "You think they noticed?" "Maybe Maggie. She's probably the only one who cared." Rhea set down the mending. "Do you ever wonder what they said when they realized I was gone?" "Not particularly, but I imagine Martha Brennan had plenty of opinions." Rhea laughed. "I'm sure she did. Probably told everyone she knew I'd run off, that I wasn't stable enough for civilized society." She wasn't wrong about that last part. You're not made for civilized society. You're made for this. He gestured around the cabin. Real things. Honest work. A life that matters. The words settled into her like warmth. He was right. She'd spent 15 years trying to fit into a world that didn't want her, and now she was building a world of her own. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you chose me." He looked up from his carving, his gray eyes catching the firelight. "I'm glad you chose me back." They went to bed that night with snow falling softly outside, the cabin warm and secure, and for the first time, Rhea didn't stay on her side of the bed. She moved closer to the center, close enough that their shoulders touched. Caleb went still. Then, slowly, he put his arm around her. They fell asleep that way, and when Rhea woke in the morning, she was wrapped completely in his arms, his breath warm against her hair. She didn't move. Didn't want to break whatever this was. Outside, the mountain was covered in fresh snow, pristine and new. Inside, something even newer was beginning. Winter hit the mountain like a fist. The snow that had seemed gentle in October turned vicious by November, piling up in drifts that buried the lower windows and made leaving the cabin a calculated risk. The temperature dropped so low that water left outside froze solid in minutes. The wind howled through the pines with a sound like wolves hunting. Rhea learned what real cold felt like, what isolation meant when you were truly cut off from the world, what it was like to depend completely on another person and have them depend on you. The cabin became their entire universe. They ate together, worked together, slept pressed against each other for warmth. The careful distance they'd maintained eroded slowly, replaced by an intimacy born of necessity that gradually became something more. One morning in early December, Rhea woke to find Caleb already up, feeding the fire. She watched him from the bed, studying the way he moved, efficient, purposeful, completely at home in this harsh place. "How long have you been awake?" she asked. "Hour, maybe." "Didn't want to wake you." He glanced back at her. "You were smiling in your sleep." "Good dream?" "I don't remember." She sat up, pulling the blankets around her shoulders. "What were you thinking about?" "Whether we have enough wood to last through January. Whether the elk will move down to the lower valley early this year. Whether—" He stopped himself. "Whether what?" He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Whether you're happy here. Really happy. Not just surviving." Rhea got out of bed and crossed to where he stood by the fire. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet, but she didn't care. "I'm happy," she said. "Happier than I've ever been. Even though it's hard, even though you're cut off from everything, because of those things, not in spite of them." She took his hand. "In Coldwater Ridge, I was surrounded by people and completely alone. Here, it's just us, and I've never felt less alone in my life." He pulled her into his arms, and Rhea let herself sink into the embrace. This was normal now. The touching, the casual affection, the way they moved around each other like planets in orbit. "I need to check the traps today," he said against her hair. "Want to come?" 6 months ago, Rhea would have said no, would have been terrified of getting lost, of slowing him down, of being more burden than help. Now she just nodded. "Let me get dressed." They set out after breakfast, moving through snow that came up to Rhea's knees in places. She'd learned to walk with snowshoes, to read the landscape, to follow Caleb's tracks when the trail disappeared under fresh powder. The first 3 traps were empty. The 4th had caught a fox. Beautiful and dead, its red fur stark against the white snow. Caleb reset the trap while Rhea stood watch. They'd developed this rhythm over months of working together. He did what he was better at, she covered what he couldn't, and together they were more efficient than either could be alone. "Getting good at this," Caleb said, securing the fox to his pack. "At standing around watching you work?" "At being present. At knowing when to help and when to let me handle it." He straightened, looking at her. "That's harder than it sounds." They were heading back when Rhea saw the smoke. It was thin and distant, rising from somewhere down in the valley they'd traveled through months ago. Smoke meant people, and people meant complications. "You see it?" Caleb asked. "Yeah." "Who would be out here in winter? Trappers, maybe? Or traders heading for the spring settlements?" He adjusted the pack on his shoulders. "Could also be someone in trouble." Rhea heard the conflict in his voice. "Up here, you helped people in trouble. It was an unwritten law of survival. But helping meant exposure, meant questions, meant the outside world creeping into the sanctuary they'd built." "What do you want to do?" she asked. "Check it out. Make sure they're okay. Then come home." He looked at her. "But only if you're comfortable with it." "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because someone might know you. Might have come from Coldwater Ridge looking for the woman who disappeared." He paused. "I don't think anyone would come all this way just to find you, but if they did, then we deal with it." Rhea surprised herself with how calm she sounded. "I'm not hiding anymore, Caleb. If someone came looking for me, they can see what I've become and know they were wrong about everything." They approached the smoke cautiously, Caleb's rifle in his hands. As they got closer, Rhea could make out a rough camp, 2 horses, a small fire, and 3 figures huddled around it. One of them looked up as they approached and stood quickly, hand going to his belt. "Easy," Caleb called out. "Just checking if you need help." The man relaxed slightly. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of soft edges that said he hadn't been out here long. "We're good," he said, but his voice shook. "Just stopped to warm up before pushing on." Rhea studied the camp more carefully. The fire was poorly built, the horses looked exhausted, and one of the other figures, a woman, was shivering so hard her whole body shook. "You're not good," Caleb said flatly. "How long have you been traveling?" 4 days. We're heading for the Morrison settlement. Should be there by tomorrow." "Morrison's 6 days from here in good weather. In this snow, you'll never make it." Caleb looked at the woman, who was now clearly hypothermic. "She needs shelter and heat. Now." "We can't impose. It's not an imposition. It's survival." Caleb turned to Rhea. "What do you think? Can we get them to the cabin?" Rhea looked at the 3 strangers, at their inadequate supplies and desperate situation, and made a choice. "We can try." Getting them to the cabin took 3 hours of slow, careful travel. The woman, her name was Anna, could barely walk. Her husband Thomas had to support her most of the way. The third person, Thomas's brother Michael, was the one who'd spoken first. He was clearly in over his head, making this journey on someone else's conviction rather than his own. By the time they reached the cabin, Anna was unconscious. Caleb carried her inside and laid her by the fire, while Rhea got blankets and started heating water. They worked together without speaking, each knowing what needed to be done. Thomas hovered uselessly until Caleb told him to get out of the way. Michael stood in the corner looking shocked by the efficiency with which 2 strangers were saving his sister-in-law's life. "She's going to be okay," Rhea said after checking Anna's breathing and color. "But she needs rest and warmth. She can't travel for at least 3 days." "3 days?" Thomas looked panicked. "We can't stay here for 3 days. We have to get to Morrison before—" "Before what?" Caleb asked, his voice hard. "Before your wife dies, because that's what'll happen if you try to move her now." Thomas deflated. "We're running from something. Someone. If we don't keep moving, then you deal with it here, where you have shelter and help instead of dying in a snowbank." Caleb stood. "You can trust us, or you can leave. But if you leave, she dies. Those are your options." They stayed. Over the next 3 days, Rhea learned their story. Thomas and Anna had been farmers in a settlement 2 weeks south. They'd borrowed money from a man named Carson to expand their operation, and when they couldn't pay it back, Carson had taken everything. Their land, their equipment, their home. When Thomas had tried to fight it legally, Carson had threatened violence. So they'd run, heading for Morrison where Anna's family could take them in. It was a story Rhea had heard variations of before. Good people crushed by bad circumstances and worse people. You could have fought, Michael said on the second night. They were all sitting around the fire, Anna finally strong enough to sit up. Could have stood your ground. And gotten killed for it? Thomas shook his head. No, running was the smart choice. Running is just slow dying, Michael countered. At least if you'd fought, you'd have your dignity. Dignity doesn't keep you warm, Rhea said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. I know what it's like to have to choose between your pride and your survival. And I can tell you that survival is always the right choice. Because you can rebuild dignity. You can't rebuild a life if you're dead. Anna looked at her with new understanding. You've been where we are. Worse, maybe, or just different. Rhea glanced at Caleb. But I made a choice to save myself instead of fighting people who would never see my worth. And that choice gave me a chance to become something better. You don't seem like you're running from anything, Thomas said, looking around the cabin. You seem settled, strong. Now I am. 6 months ago, I was the woman the whole town wanted gone. The woman nobody chose. She felt Caleb's hand find hers. But one person chose me anyway, and that changed everything. After they left, Anna strong enough to travel, armed with supplies Caleb insisted they take, the cabin felt different, quieter, but also more solid, like hosting others had somehow made it more real. You told them everything, Caleb said that night as they lay in bed. Not everything, just enough. Rhea turned to face him in the darkness. Did I say too much? No. You said exactly what they needed to hear. He was quiet for a moment. You've changed, Rhea. You know that? I know, I can feel it. I'm not the same person who left Coldwater Ridge. Do you miss her? That version of yourself? Rhea thought about it, about the woman who'd been so small, so careful, so desperate to be invisible. No, she said, I don't miss her at all. She was surviving. I'm living. There's a difference. Caleb pulled her closer. I'm proud of you. I know I don't say it enough, but I am. You could have given up 100 times and you didn't. I had help. You had a partner, but you did the work. His voice was soft in the darkness. And watching you become who you were always supposed to be has been the greatest privilege of my life. Rhea felt tears sting her eyes. I love you. The words came out without planning, without fear, just truth. Caleb went still. Then he said, I love you too. Have for months. Just didn't know if you... She kissed him, cutting off the words. It wasn't their first kiss. They'd shared brief touches, gentle goodnight kisses, the casual affection of people who lived in each other's space. But this was different. This was choosing each other not out of necessity, but out of want. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. Rhea Voss, he said, testing her married name. That sounds right. It does, she agreed. It really does. That night marked a shift. They were no longer two people sharing a space out of convenience. They were partners by choice, lovers by desire, building something that was entirely their own. Spring came slowly to the mountain, the snow reluctant to release its hold. But when it finally melted, it revealed a landscape transformed. Wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion. The creek swelled with runoff. Animals emerged from winter hiding, filling the forest with life. Rhea emerged too. She'd spent the winter learning to survive. Now she spent the spring learning to thrive. She started a garden, using seeds they'd traded for at Samuel's post. The soil was rocky and stubborn, but Rhea was more stubborn. She cleared rocks, amended the earth with compost, built protective fences to keep out deer and rabbits. Caleb watched her work with something like amazement. Never seen anyone attack dirt with that much determination, he said one afternoon. This dirt is going to give me vegetables, whether it wants to or not. Rhea wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of mud. I'm tired of eating preserved food. I want fresh things, green things. Going to build a whole farm up here? Maybe. Would that be so bad? He grinned. No, that would be good. You're thinking long term. That's good. Long term. The phrase settled into Rhea like a promise. She was thinking long term, thinking about next season, next year, the life they were building that stretched forward instead of just existing day to day. She was also thinking about the bundle of fabric she'd hidden in the storage shed. The sewing supplies she'd brought from Coldwater Ridge and hadn't touched in 8 months. She'd been so focused on learning to survive that she'd forgotten she had skills beyond just endurance. One evening, while Caleb was checking traps, Rhea pulled out the fabric and her tools. She sat at the table and ran her fingers over the cloth, feeling the familiar texture, the weight of possibility. She could make things, beautiful things, useful things, and there were people on this mountain who might need them. By the time Caleb got home, she'd cut out the pieces for a winter coat, smaller than anything she'd made before, sized for a child. "What's this?" he asked. "Anna's pregnant." Rhea kept working, her hands remembering the patterns they'd practiced for years. "I noticed it when they were here, but didn't say anything. They'll need baby clothes, warm things for winter."
You're making clothes for people you met once. I'm making clothes because I can, because it's what I'm good at, because sitting around feeling useless was driving me crazy. She looked up at him. "Is that okay?" "More than okay." He came to stand behind her, his hands on her shoulders. "I was wondering when you'd get back to this. I needed to prove I could survive first, that I wasn't just the soft town woman playing at mountain life." She leaned back against him. "But I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm ready to be more than that." Over the summer, Rhea's sewing became a business. Word spread through the sparse mountain community. Samuel told a trapper, who told a settler, who told a mining family. People started showing up at the cabin with requests: a warm coat for winter, sturdy pants for working, a dress for a daughter's wedding. Rhea worked with the same intensity she'd brought to splitting wood and hauling water. But this was different. This was creating instead of just maintaining. This was using skills she'd honed over 15 years for people who valued them. And the money, people paid in furs, in meat, in actual currency when they had it, that money gave them options, security, a buffer against disaster. "You're building an empire up here," Caleb said one evening, watching her work by lamplight. "I'm building a life, our life." She finished a seam, tied off the thread. "Is it too much? Am I neglecting other things?" "You're doing everything that needs doing and then some." He pulled her away from the table. "But right now, you need to stop and rest. I have 3 more. They'll wait. You won't." He led her outside where the summer night was warm and full of stars. "Look up." Rhea looked up and gasped. The sky was on fire with northern lights, green and purple curtains dancing across the darkness. "I've never seen anything like this," she whispered. "First time I saw them, I thought the world was ending." Caleb put his arm around her. "Then I realized it was just beginning, that there was beauty up here I'd never imagined." They stood together, watching the lights dance, and Rhea felt something settle deep in her chest. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of purpose. "I want to have a baby," she said suddenly. Caleb went still. "What?" "A baby. I want us to have a child." She turned to face him. "I know it's dangerous up here. I know it'll make everything harder, but I want to build a family with you. I want to create something that's ours." He was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable in the strange light. Then he said, "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Are you?" "I've been sure since the day you agreed to marry me." He pulled her close. "I just didn't want to push. Didn't want you to feel like that was an expectation." "It's not an expectation. It's a choice. My choice." She kissed him. "So yes, let's have a baby and raise them wild and free and strong." Their daughter was born the following spring, arriving during a late snowstorm that trapped them in the cabin for 3 days. Rhea labored for 18 hours with only Caleb to help her, both of them terrified and determined in equal measure. When the baby finally came, small and perfect and screaming with outrage at the cold world, Rhea held her and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of love. "She's beautiful," Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. "She looks like you." "She looks like both of us." Rhea traced the baby's tiny features. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed names for months, never settling on one. But looking at their daughter now, Rhea knew. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope. Because that's what this child was. Hope made flesh. Proof that something good could grow from the ashes of everything Rhea had lost.
Hope grew strong on the mountain, learning to walk on uneven ground, to talk in the silence of pine forests, to laugh at the wind. She was fearless in the way children raised without judgment can be, confident in her parents' love in a way Rhea had never been as a child. Watching her daughter grow, Rhea finally understood what she'd been missing all those years in Coldwater Ridge. Not acceptance, not approval, just the simple freedom to be herself without apologizing for it. She taught Hope to sew before the girl turned 5, tiny hands learning to make tiny stitches. Caleb taught her to track animals, to read the weather, to respect the mountain that was their home. Together, they gave her something neither of them had fully experienced themselves: unconditional belonging. When Hope was 6, a rider came up the mountain with news from the valley. Coldwater Ridge had burned. A fire in late summer, spread by wind, had consumed half the town. No one had died, but the damage was extensive. Among the buildings lost, Rhea's old shop. "You okay?" Caleb asked that night after Hope had gone to sleep. "I'm fine." Rhea stared into the fire. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel something, sadness, or anger, or at least regret. But all I feel is nothing. That place stopped being real to me years ago." "You don't wonder what happened to anyone? Maggie? The widows?" "Maggie's fine. She writes sometimes, remember? Moved to a bigger town, married a baker, has 3 kids. Rhea smiled. "She's happy. That's all I need to know." "And the others?" "I hope they survived. I hope they learned something. But honestly, I don't think about them at all anymore." She leaned against him. "That version of my life feels like it happened to someone else. Someone I used to know, but don't anymore." "No regrets?" "Not a single one." She took his hand. "Leaving that place and building this life, it's the best thing I ever did. The only thing that mattered." Years passed. Hope grew into a strong, capable young woman who could out-track her father and out-sew her mother. They expanded the cabin, built a real workshop for Rhea's sewing business, established trade relationships with settlements throughout the mountain region. Rhea's reputation grew. She became known as the seamstress who could make anything, who understood both function and beauty, who charged fair prices and delivered quality work. People traveled for days to commission pieces from her. She was successful, independent, valued for her skills, and respected for her character. Everything Coldwater Ridge had told her she could never be. On the 20th anniversary of leaving that town, Rhea stood outside the cabin and looked at everything they'd built. The garden was lush with vegetables. The workshop hummed with activity. She'd taken on 2 apprentices from nearby settlements. Hope was inside, working on a wedding dress for a girl from the Morrison settlement. Caleb came up behind her, his hair now streaked with gray, his body still strong despite the years. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How that town tried to erase me, tried to make me so small I'd disappear." She turned to face him, and how instead I became something they never imagined, something bigger and stronger and more real than any of them ever were. "You were always that. They just couldn't see it." "No, I became it. There's a difference." She took his hand. "The woman I was in Coldwater Ridge, she was real. But she was also small and scared and half alive. It took leaving, took choosing this life, took building something from nothing to become who I was always supposed to be." "And who's that?" Rhea smiled. "Someone who knows her own worth. Someone who doesn't need permission to exist. Someone who chose herself and found out that was enough." That night the family gathered around the fire. Rhea, Caleb, Hope, and the 2 apprentices who'd become like adopted daughters. They ate dinner together, laughed together, shared stories of the day's work and tomorrow's plans. And Rhea looked around at the life she'd built. Not the life she'd been told to want, but the life she'd chosen, and felt complete. She'd been the woman no one chose. The woman society rejected. The woman everyone expected to fail. But she'd chosen herself. And in doing that, she'd found everything that mattered. Not approval, not acceptance, not validation from people whose opinions were worth less than dust. She'd found purpose, partnership, love. A life built on her own terms in a place that demanded only honesty and strength. The town that had tried to destroy her was ash and memory. The life she'd built was solid and real and enduring. And the woman who'd once been invisible now stood at the center of a world she'd created, seen, valued, and absolutely certain of her worth. She was never unworthy. She was just in the wrong world, but she'd found the right one. Built it with her own hands, filled it with people who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. And that, Rhea had learned, was the only legacy that mattered. Not what others thought you should be, but what you chose to become when you finally stopped listening to voices that were never worth hearing. She'd become herself, fully, completely, unapologetically. And in the end, that was everything.